people. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. I am your host, Jason Miles, and if you are new to the channel, please hit like, please hit subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell as we are constantly adding new programming to the channel all the time. Recently, our co-host, the man of the Mau Mau Hour, Pascal Robert, was on Big Waz's show. So let's check that out. And let's bring in the man of the Mau Mau Hour. He is the Pascal Robert.
Peace and greetings to the chat. Peace and greetings to the audience. Peace and greetings, Jason Miles.
What's going on, man? How are you?
Man, interesting day. Been through some variety of emotions. I called you a little earlier today, perturbed about the subject matter we're going to discuss. I had a long conversation with Janice Graham.
Oh, geez.
She kind of calmed me down.
You had to go to the OG. You had to go to the OG.
Yes, I was kind of angry, to say the least.
I'm actually kind of excited about today's show. You and Kuba have some interesting things I'm excited to hear you guys break down. But before we even get there, let's bring in everybody's favorite middle manager of the Death Star. He is the Deep State Kuba.
Hello, everyone. Jason, bad news. I spoke with the assistant vice moth, and your request for vacation time has been denied. We've got some quarterly numbers we need to hit, and it's all hands on deck.
Well, speaking of quarterly numbers, recently here at TIR, for our patrons, we finally got together and did another movie night. Also chosen by Pascal, we did A Soldier Story.
Actually, we can talk about that for about 5 minutes.
You want to talk about A Soldier Story real quick?
About how movie night went overall, actually.
You know, I will be honest. Sadly, I had audio issues. I couldn't participate in the after discussion. For those of you that have been to the first movie night, my favorite part of movie night is we can finally see you guys because we use Discord. Jeremy Solomon hooks it up for us, and we can actually see people, and we have an interactive discussion about what we just saw, and it's really cool. So I was a little bummed about that, but
I was actually kind of bummed that you couldn't participate as well. I was actually somewhat bummed that Kuba and Djene and a few of the other regulars of the show couldn't watch, like not only Vaughn, but Forrest, Flacco. And there's a lot of people that I really wish could have watched that movie with us.
Soldier's Tale. Soldier Story.
It's an American Tale and a Soldier Story all rolled into one for you.
The part that she couldn't access the link. Shirley, all you had to do was come into the Discord. It was
Yeah.
via Discord, Shirley.
It was via Discord. It is pinned to the top of Patreon. I forgot how good that movie was. I forgot how amazing those performances were by those actors. A very young Denzel, David Allen Greer. What's really funny is all those actors, I believe all those actors are from the East. I think David Allen Greer might be from Detroit, but I mean, all of them cats are from the East Coast putting on Southern accents,
and a lot of them came out of the United Negro Ensemble, which was the first place I saw the theatrical version of A Soldier's Story, which is a soldier's play. And to echo what you just said, Jason, I haven't seen that movie probably in over a decade. It's one of my favorite movies. I've seen it several times, but I haven't seen it in a long time. Bro, when I watched that movie last night, it was stunning, the depth of the storyline and the acting and so many things that we talk about on this show that we mentioned in the after hours, right? In the after conversation. Subtleties. Like we talk about, for example, the concept of racial uplift, right? Like the way in which the early iteration of the talented 10th elites kind of vested their sheer presence as a means of racial uplift for people who were not their class equals, So we often reference Torrey Reed's book, Not Arms But Opportunity, talking about how the National Urban League would engage in this kind of racial uplift concept. And we talked about, particularly, I think in the last show or the show before, we talked with Kuba about the kind of toxic nature of racial uplift, because when Kuba was discussing about the boys from Porcelainian or Skull and Bones, the chaps in Appalachia, the poor white kids, are not looking to be racially uplifted by the boys from Porcelainian.
Quite the contrary.
Quite the contrary. They know they're all class enemies of each other, right? In the first scene in The Soldier's Story, when you see the captain, the brother who's the investigator of the actual...
Oh.
Yeah. I don't want to say...
Rollins. Yeah.
Right. I forget what his name is. I think it's
Howard Rollins.
Howard Rollins is the actor, right? Now, he's a captain. Now, obviously, because this is like 1944, most of these soldiers have never seen a black officer. When you see these privates, now understanding the military, normally a private is going to be, a captain is going to give me crap. I'm not going to be oohed-eyed by a captain. I'm looking at him as like someone's going to be, busting my behind.
He's your boss.
Yeah, he's basically your boss, right? These guys looked at the captain when he comes on the base like he was cash money. The black officer. Oh my Lord. And it's not even something you see in the dialogue. It's not something that's mentioned. It's literally in the way these actors conveyed the toxic way that racial uplift was replete in just the interaction between the privates and the captain, the officer. And what's funny that in terms of how he ends up treating them, he treats them like crap.
Yeah. Like a captain.
Yeah, throughout the whole investigation.
My favorite line though is when the captain is meeting the is it the lieutenant? Who is the white? There's a lieutenant, the white guy that he's talking to, that says, "Was your family rich or something? You went to Howard?" He goes, "Well, my dad was a mailman."
His dad was a mailman. and we've talked about on the show is that what we know is that in those days, a mailman was like a middle class job for a black family. That was like a big deal. You got a job, you a mailman? Oh, that's a real.
It was a middle class job for a lot of people in a lot of places. I had a great grandfather who was in the postal service of the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Really?
And yes. This was when there was no Poland, and he was Moravian, but he moved into the Polish partition to be a postal official for the emperor. And he had like a military style uniform. He looked like he should be an officer in those pictures. And the truth is that if you go back far enough, the Postal Service is a strategic communications infrastructure, and it's a really big deal to keep it running smoothly. It's not always easy to do either, but it's only kind of in the 60s and 70s that all kinds of work that don't require a college degree become devalued and degraded.
Well, we've talked enough on this show as to why that happens with the pivot to neoliberalism, deunionization, et cetera, et cetera. Also, the increase in university attendance, the rise of the professional managerial class, post Bretton Woods. I mean, we've hammered that nail a million times on this show in terms of what really causes that happen. And I think Kuba is absolutely correct in echoing how that kind of change occurs. But it's just the movie. I knew that it was a good movie, Jason.
Mm-hmm.
I was just stunned at how absolutely superb the movie is.
The what's really interesting, and I'll stop with this, and we'll move on to the topics. Time is of the essence. Is Denzel's quote about why a black director had to do, was it Fences?
Oh yeah, we brought that up.
And the fact that Norman Jewison does a phenomenal job of directing that movie, down to the fact that you can feel. I really feel like when you want to understand the tension and the heat that was on everyone, he does such a great job by keeping everyone. I wouldn't be surprised if they were literally sweating, because they're in the deep South, where it's just disgustingly humid, where even you're sweating in the shower. And that is part of the movie as well, the humidity and the disgusting heat. It's shot real well, considering it's a movie based on a play. Usually movies based on plays are kind of shot in a couple different locations. They do a great job with the jute joint to the barracks. Phenomenal film. I know people were complaining about the soundtrack. Herbie Hancock did the soundtrack, and it is a bit dated, I guess, in some people's minds. I just have a affinity for 80s synth, so it was right up my alley. So
it was incredible,
Pascal. I love the fact that Kuba is just a dark shadow.
Why is Kuba sitting there as if he's a character in a documentary on MK Ultra?
Yeah, everyone thinks that I was trying to adjust the lighting to appear better for this show, but I'm actually setting up for my next bit, right? Where I have to give orders to a sleeper cell in Lugansk. They can't know who I am.
Well, moving on to the first topic of the day, Pascal will be batting lead off in the news roundup. The Oscar slap is still dominating the news cycle. It seems people are split in their opinions of who was the aggressor in the impromptu altercation. But regardless of how you feel about who was right or wrong, there seems to be a celebration of Will Smith's action and his admission of his mental illness. Pascal, I believe you have some words to say about this.
Yes. Jason, for the last couple of days, has been somewhat kind of ribbing me. It was like, yo, man, you're still posting about Will Smith. And he was like, why are you doing this? And he didn't understand that.
In all fairness, I didn't, so I apologize.
Not so much in reaction to the whole slap thing, because for a long time, I thought the whole thing was staged. There's part of me that still thinks it might be. That's irrelevant to this conversation. The reaction that I've seen to the slap was so disturbing to me that it literally made me almost just like tremble. For those, just to give context, for those who are totally oblivious, Sunday was the Academy Awards Oscars for Best Film, Best Picture of the year. It was produced by Will Packer, who is a Black African-American film producer, director. I think he made Stomp the Yard. And for those who want to know, Will Packer is also a member of my fraternity. As a matter of fact, went to FAMU, Florida Agricultural Mechanical University. Very respected filmmaker. I think he did the film. Not she gotta have, what is it? I forget what the the movie that was based on Steve Harvey's book, How to Get a Man or something like that. I think he was the film director in that one. But the point is that he was the producer of the Academy Awards. And for those who don't know, in recent years, the Academy Awards television broadcast has done very poorly in ratings in the last few years. And even further context, I believe the year was 2015 or 16. There was a bit of a scandal caused by social media because of the sheer lack of presence of Black nominations for
Hashtag Oscars so white.
Oh yeah, the Oscars so white hashtag. That was like a big scandal. Everyone was like, "Oh, there are no Black people," so on and so forth, et cetera, et cetera. And as a matter of fact, that same year, Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith boycotted the Oscar, and Jada Pinkett Smith actually filmed a boycott in which he says, "Forget the Oscars. It's not for us. It's not about us," i.e., meaning Black people. We can celebrate and validate ourselves, which is ironic because, you're also vested in it now that Will Smith is nominated, but you weren't that vested when the Oscar so white was going on. So I think the logical conclusion in the combination of ratings being very low and the complaints about lack of diversity and representation, it seems that the Academy hired Will Packer to spice up the Oscars, make it more appealing to Black audiences, guarantee more diversity, and it also happens to be a year where Will Smith, the major complainant of the Oscar so white year, is being nominated for his film, which is King Richard, which is the story of Venus Williams and Serena Williams' father. Okay? So, more context. For those who do not know, and I don't want to get into the sordid details, but this is part we have to understand that there has been a significant amount of marital drama between Will and Jada Pinkett Smith, that has been made public as a result of an online television kind of talk show that Jada Pinkett Smith hosts called The Red Table Talk. All right? Basically, in 2020, I believe it was revealed that she had allegedly an affair with a young man who was friend of their son, who was going through was suicidal and going in a very mentally fragile state. They were going through marital problems at that time. And because the young man revealed it publicly that he had an affair with Jada Pinkett Smith, they addressed it on the Red Table Talk. And she was very, very candid and blunt about the fact that she had an affair, a 50-year-old woman with a 23-year-old young man who was a friend of their son, who also, based on their own admission, was suicidal and mentally unstable and was seeking comfort from them. Some people, I'm not here to cast opinions or judgments of that behavior. You all are grown adults. You can basically determine what you will, the moral efficacy of that behavior. It's pretty clear by the way Will Smith reacts to those statements that it was humiliating. Basically, Will Smith was cuckolded in front of millions of people. Okay? And, of course, because we know we live in a hyper-patriarchal, very sexist world where men are expected to live up to certain standards of, male prowess and all this kind of stuff. We understand the whole really kind of twisted gender politics of patriarchal expectations of male efficacy and fidelity and all that other stuff, there were many people, particularly in various communities like the black community, who were basically saying like, "Yo, Will, he ain't that man. He's not a man. He was definitely getting played a lot." Okay. My position is that since that time up until today, everything Will Smith has been doing, including the King Richard role, including writing a new biography in November 2021, including all of his media appearances, has been a rebranding exercise to redeem himself in the eyes of the public, in the face of the humiliation of that 2020 cuckolding. And it's not so much just because of Will Smith. For those of you who are more into popular culture than I am, Will Smith is one of the most bankable actors in Hollywood. He is a mega, mega, mega celebrity. He is bankable. I think there's no question he's probably, without a doubt, the most bankable black male actor by far across the board in American, if not Western media, and probably one of the 10 most bankable actors in the country. Now, what does that mean? When an actor gets to that level of celebrity, it's not just about him anymore. He is now a commodity. There are economic institutions in the culture industry of Hollywood that are invested in Will Smith. People feed their children because of Will Smith. He's not an individual. He is literally a corporate being. So what you realize when you understand how important his bankability is to the Hollywood industry, it becomes very clear that after that cuckolding experience, Hollywood is going to do everything it can to try to rehabilitate this man's image. Right? But at the same time, Will Smith is kind of working in middle class neighborhood from Philly. Will Smith also knows that he plays this kind of dual role as Mr. Racial Uplift, black family, power couple, me and Jada nonsense up until the Red Table Talks. That was the perception, you know what I'm saying? Hashtag, relationship goals, hashtag black excellence, hashtag go fuck yourself, all that nonsense. So that's because Will is conscious of how this is being projected in black spaces. He realizes that this stuff is affecting maybe not only my bottom line, but my overall kind of marketability. I have a certain credibility, et cetera, so on and so forth. In his biography, he writes about his father, who he adored. I've seen interviews of Will Smith with his father. The man adores his father. How Will Smith always considered himself a coward because he saw his father engage in an episode of domestic violence. And because he couldn't check his dad, he felt like he was a coward. I'm like, dude, I've seen you interact with your dad. You basically look like your dad was one of your biggest heroes. But again, because, I'm not saying the incident didn't occur when he was a kid, but it's interesting how, the otherwise normal black father that you worship now for the taste buds of particularly white liberal media is now a domestic abuser. How well does that stereotype get eaten up by Oprah on the couch and a few other people in some academic departments throughout the country? And again, I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm not trying to diminish the alleged domestic violence incident, but there is a way you can convey a story, and there's a way you can play to the audience as well. So again, all of this is happening. The book comes out in November. It's a bestseller. He does the King Richard movie which is again about a narrative of black masculinity and fatherhood, a projection of King Richard, the redemptive black male father who had his own kind of scandals. So if you think it's ironic or accidental that he's being nominated for this role that is supposed to be about a certain kind of efficacious black patriarchal father figure, the ultimate man who turns his daughters into a tennis hero after experiencing that humiliation as a cuckold, then oh wow, I don't think that was an accident. Particularly considering that he was complaining about being denied an Oscar nomination during Oscar So White. Right? So again, remember, we're saying all of this is happening under the context of Will is Mr. Bankability. Hollywood is invested in him, and they've got to redeem him. So we go to the night of the Oscars. Chris Rock is one of the hosts. Chris Rock is a comedian. We all know Chris Rock. He's kind of, he's a comedian. Comedians make jokes. I don't think anyone is shocked that comedians at the Oscars or awards show make jokes about celebrities in the audience.
I mean, Ricky Gervais, his bread and butter is insulting people, and he basically has a lock on the Golden Globes because it's really funny. It does very, very well, that type of aggressive humor directed at these celebrities that the audience at once idolizes and also resents.
Right. In other words, it is not an earth-shattering shtick to anyone that a comedian at an award show makes jokes about celebrities in the audience. So Chris Rock does his shtick, and he goes to Jada, and he makes a joke that's not even a funny joke. First of all, I had to do a Google search because I never saw the movie he talked about, and I didn't even understand the context. He said,
I didn't know she had alopecia either.
Well, I'm going to get to that. He says, hey, Jada, I love you. Hey, looking forward to seeing you in G.I. Jane 2. People start laughing. Will Smith starts laughing. Jada Pinkett rolls her eyes. Now, when I first heard his context, I was like, I don't even understand what the F that means. I don't know why it's supposed to be funny, why it's not funny, why is she rolling her eyes? What is going on? So I hit the Googles. I Googled G.I. Jane. I see the first image of the star of the movie. I was like, oh, okay. She had
Demi Moore.
Okay, so I said, okay, so basically Chris Rock is making a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith's bald head. I was like, okay, what's the big deal? All right, he made a joke about her hairstyle. Then for the first time, by the way, I don't follow the Smiths, but I'm pretty active on the social medias. I know I kind of do listen to what the cool kids are talking about. I had no idea this woman had alopecia. First of all, I had to Google what the hell alopecia was. I was like, is this a fruit? What the hell is that?
Sounds a little like a small llama.
So I was like, okay, she had alopecia. I was like, what's alopecia? Is that like Cousin Pookie's cousin? Who's alopecia? I was like, what's alopecia? All right, so I was like, I learned what alopecia is. I learned also because I knew that Ayanna Pressley, the congressman from Massachusetts,
she has alopecia.
I knew that her head was bald because she had some condition. I never knew what it was. I don't know if it was cancer. I knew she had some medical condition that made her not have hair. I learned that same night. They're like, oh, she has the same thing that Jada Pinkett Smith has. It's called alopecia. Okay, so I'm researching alopecia. I'm like, oh, alopecia is hair loss that can be caused by actual hair treatment, perming your hair. I'm doing some research. Like, oh, okay, black women disproportionately have alopecia. Men can get alopecia. I also happen to find out that alopecia is not a disability according to the American with Disabilities Act.
You sure?
No, it's not. It's not considered a disability. Alopecia is not a death. It's not fatal.
If you made alopecia a disability on the basis of hair loss, then what about male pattern baldness?
Yeah, exactly. I want my check.
All right. So alopecia is basically male pattern baldness that affects women. So as a matter of fact, when male pattern baldness is sometimes called alopecia. I learned that too.
That's
So
my excuse.
So I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Fine. So I'm realizing that, okay, Jada Pickett rolled her eyes because allegedly she's going through all this dramatic explanation of the struggles of dealing with alopecia, the problems. Listen. We all have health disorders. I'm not to diminish the woman's struggle or suffering with hair loss. I'm sensitive to the fact. Listen, I have a mother, I have an aunt, I have a cousin, I have little sisters. I'm sensitive to the importance of hair to women overall, and I'm sensitive to the history of the way hair, particularly for Black women, has been a serious point of contention. I'm well aware of all the political history around that. I'm not insensitive to that. Okay? At the same time, it's not as if Chris Rock was like, "Your bald head, no hair, be able to grow ass, chicken head skank with the follicles all jacked up. What's wrong with you, girl? Who's your barber? A blind man?"
Hey, look, everybody. I found the Hansel and Gretel witch. She's in the front row. Did you come in like in your Bentley, or did you just fly in on a broom?
Are you going bowling with that head, woman? What's going on here? I mean, if Chris Rock went in like that, like hard, like damn, girl, what's happening here? Did you miss the Buddhist monk? It's down there. If he went like in, I would have been like, oh, yo, that's jacked up. I wouldn't have condoned what ends up happening, but I would have been like, yo, damn. Oh, she had alopecia too. Oh, that's jacked up. At that point, I would be like, yo, that was kind of foul. My man Chris really shouldn't have gone in on this. Listen, I'm not just because I'm not into collective racial community. I'm so divorced from Blackness that I'm not empathetic to like, damn, he made that sister look bad. Like, I get that. I'm enough of a race man to understand that. But the point I'm trying to say that there's a big line between all the jokes I just made and, hey, looking forward to see you in G.I. Jane 2, which wasn't even funny.
No, it was not.
Yo, women were acting like my man was literally showing images of her scalp at the Oscars. I was like, you see that little ball back there? Yo, are there roaches in there? I was like, God damn. All he said is that you're going to be in G.I. Jane 2? Which was so bad a joke, I had to Google it.
Hey, what's the difference between the moon and Jada Pinkett Smith's bald head?
Yeah, I mean, like if Chris Rock had gone in like that, I would have been like, damn, son, my man really did kind of throw some shade at Jada. That was kind of messed up. Yo,
they're both round and shiny, but the moon is actually much smoother with fewer blemishes and craters.
Let me tell you something about Pascal, right? When my college sweetheart was a woman who used to have very long hair. She went through a period where she decided to get a short haircut, and she went bald. Yeah, I'm kind of one of those cats who I think Black women with the right head shape with a bald head, I think that shit is sexy.
Yeah, totally hot.
I think it's sexy as hell. I'm one of those cats who I like Black women with like short naturals or like a Caesar. I was like, that shit can be hot as this. What the Djene. Djene back in the day.
Yeah, Djene.
I thought those were fun as hell. I was like, oh, that shit is hot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I mean, I assumed when I first saw the pictures of Jada Pinkett Smith that she was just going for like a kind of, daring, unconventional look, and was totally nailing it, right? Like, very attractive.
I'm one of those cats. yes, there are a lot of men, black or otherwise, who's like, I love the long flowing hair. I'm not that dude. I'm not saying I don't like women with long hair. What I'm saying is like, yo, you got a natural, you got a shortcut, you got a buzz cut, you got a short
Yeah,
afro.
I mean, there are many ways to be beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. I'm all good with that. It's not a problem. But the thing is, though, this whole thing was made to seem like it was a complete indictment of the struggles of black women and their hair, especially because Chris Rock did a movie about black women and their hair struggles and weaves. Chris Rock knows and he doesn't care. And I'm like, I mean, again, looking forward to seeing you in G.I. Jane? Really? Do you know that someone tried to argue with me that joke was the legal equivalent to what is recognized in most states? Some states don't recognize it as fighting words. Fighting words are words that incite immediate violence.
Yeah, that they can be used as a defense.
Someone tried to argue with me that Chris Rock saying, "Hey, Jada, she and G.I. Jane too," were fighting words.
No, I think they were.
Nigga,
I think they
what?
did qualify, but only to Demi Moore. Because let's face it, Demi carried G.I. Jane, and I don't think Jada Pinkett Smith would be up to the task.
I mean, it was absurd to me. Someone trying to argue that they were fighting words. And then, okay, to get further to the story, so he says the joke. Will Smith, on video, laughs at the joke. The camera goes to Jada Pinkett Smith. The eye roll of eye rolls. Oh, this motherfucker over here. Type eye roll. The camera
we are not amused.
Yeah. The camera goes to Chris Rock. Now, the thing is, what happens after the camera leaves Jada and goes to Chris Rock? Some speculate, listen, I've never been married. I did divorce law. I've practiced divorce law. I worked in divorce court. Everyone who's ever been married or been in a long-term relationship, and Jason will know this, there is a look your wife or husband can give you. One look, and you know off the bat, oh, I done fucked up now.
Mm-hmm.
Jason's already triggered. He's like, yeah, I know that. Look, oh shit.
Yeah. Soon Nyman's got it. Look at the chat.
I am. These motherfuckers are on point today.
You know what I'm saying? Everyone knows that there's a look that your spouse gives you that you're just like, so people are speculating that Jada gave him one of those looks.
Oh, you don't have to speculate. We have the footage.
Right? And basically, Will is processing all of this history, the cockle, the red table talk, the need to redeem his character. His wife is upset. Chris Rock just basically made a joke. Oh, we're talking about my woman's hair. So Will gets up and starts walking to Chris Rock, and Chris Rock is like, "Oh, who are you, King Richard?" And then, pow! Slaps Chris Rock in the face. Staged or not is irrelevant for this argument. I didn't think it even looked real, but whatever. Slaps him. Chris Rock responds. Chris Rock takes a slap to the face better than anyone I've ever seen. Holds it down. And then Will Smith is walking back. And then Chris Rock says, wow, Will Smith just smacked the shit out of me on national TV. There's a video that was released today that after Chris Rock says that, Jada Smith was laughing. I was like,
yes, that's her witch cackle. The spell worked.
I was like, how is she so like upset, butthurt, and she's laughing at Chris Rock reacting and getting slapped. And then Will Smith, Mr. Two-Parent Home, really not from the hood, frat parents don't understand, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, I was always a coward, all of a sudden gets Debo, Iceberg Slim's like, keep my wife's name out your motherfucking mouth. I was like, nigga, you too soft as baby shit to be able to think you can flex those words and have anyone believe it.
Well, I mean, the
keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth. I said, well, no one who is my age ever believed you were that hard.
Well, yeah, and also he's actually banking a lot on Chris Rock being the
softest baby shit.
Well, I was just gonna say reasonable because I come from a different value system, but yes.
No, you're actually right, Kuba, because Chris Rock was reasonable. Shout out to Chris Rock, because Chris Rock kept it together. Chris Rock, didn't, so on and so forth. Chris Rock just kept it cool and played it off. And then, of course, after the event, you get the plethora of 50,000 million middle-aged Negro males like, Chris Rock, look, shit. Will Smith, look, that wasn't me on the stage because I would have gonna done a, I would have gonna. I was like, nigga, shut up. You would have been like, can we go to commercial break? Get the frick out of here. This is like the Oscars version of beer muscles. That's like, oh, he's lucky I wasn't there because I would have taken off my Popeye hat, eat my spinach, and they would have been on.
Yes, it's. I mean, generally speaking, all male macho violence posturing is ridiculous, but especially the after the fact, completely non-credible version. I don't know why you would even do that. You're just making a fool of yourself. But yes, it's very, very common. And especially among conservatives too, right? Like, and conservative white guys especially are like, oh, look at him. Chivalry isn't dead. Will Smith, right? There's a guy.
Well, I want to get to the real. I've taken too long with this already because Kuba has to do his shtick, and I'm already 40 minutes in. What really ticked me off wasn't even all that. I could have ignored all that. When I saw people, particularly women who I normally respected, saying things like, Chris Rock destroyed her image. Will Smith has shown all you brothers what it means to protect a black woman. Any black man who tries to criticize Chris Rock, ladies, he's showing you what you're worth to them. Beware. And I'm like, nigga, what? I was like, hold on, what? I was like, well, hold on, what? Yo, I'm watching in real time. People are co-signing a man who has children and a family that people depend on, engaging in an act that can be either a high-level misdemeanor or perhaps in some states a felony.
Also, not everybody's going to respond like Chris Rock.
For a joke by a comedian. Understand, my mind immediately is going into lawyer mode. I'm like, do you guys understand that Will Smith, by the grace of Chris Rock, is not in jail right now? I was like, are you people out of your freaking mind? And let me tell you what, I'm gonna get really funky with it. Some of these Negroes are the same Negroes that when Pookie and Bebe in the hood get into fights that end up in blood because Bebe disrespected Pookie's girl, will be like, see, that's the problem with black folk, man. These Negroes need to get it together.
Oh yeah, like I think actually Chris Rock had a bit called it was Dave Chappelle, when keeping it real goes wrong.
Now, listen, if you watch the Boondocks, the famous skit, a nigga moment. It's on the Boondocks, a whole skit in the middle. You're like,
Oh yes, I'm quite familiar with the moment from Boondocks.
Comrade moment.
The comrade moment.
Hey, let me tell you, for me, as someone who worked in domestic violence court, as someone who did practice family law, as someone who has suffered from his own personal challenges, emotional and otherwise, seeing people initiate and instigate and say, black men, this is what you got to do from a community that suffers disproportionate violence over dumb shit more than anyone else in the motherfucking country, was obscene to me. I mean, I cannot convey to you how apocalyptic I was seeing this in my timeline. I said, yo, do y'all know? I said, do you know how many kids I saw in Jamaica, Queens, who got their face slashed with razors for less than that shit? And you were telling people this is how you're supposed to defend your woman? Are you people fucking crazy?
I mean, also, this isn't the Middle Ages. This isn't Afghanistan, right? There's, for instance, in one of my professors at Berkeley who studied the Soviet Union had what he called like the spit test for the honor culture in different Soviet republics. Like if you find a nicely dressed man in a public place and for no reason spit on his clothes. In Estonia, you'll get, anger. You'll get yelled at. You might be detained while he finds someone in authority to yell at you some more. And you might get issued a ticket. You do that in Chechnya, you just get stabbed immediately.
Oh, okay.
And there's all kinds of recourse, including some that are that were mentioned here in the chat. If Will Smith really wanted to do some damage, do a tweet, right, like that attacks Chris Rock for being anti-feminist or misogynist. There's other ways you can get your revenge that don't require that type of public extraordinary violence. And personally, I think it's a terrible pattern, right?
Listen, I had people who were literally saying to me in real time, it was just a slap. I was like, these are black people. I was like, it was just I was like, yo, do you understand what that means in certain black spaces? When a black man slaps another black man in the face? Yo, Negroes get killed for that shit, man.
I mean, try doing that in like in a Mormon corporate office environment, right? Like no one will stab you. There won't be violent retaliation, but you've just managed to scandalize everyone that you'll work with in a way that makes them never able to trust you.
Yep. No, I have my opinion on the whole thing. I talked to Teray earlier today, and we had a bit of a conversation about it. But I think Pascal, thank you very much for that very, very passionate takedown of Jada Pinkett's bald head.
Which again,
I'm sorry it took so long, man.
resembles the lunar body, except insofar as it is more pockmarked and disfigured.
Just watch us get all kind of heat from every black woman on the internet.
We're Pascal, if you think that you're not going to get heat from what you said earlier, then I don't know what to tell you, because it's coming. Kuba, shifting gears a little bit.
So, yeah, I mean, this is a tough act to follow, I gotta say. I feel a little like whoever had to do the Oscar announcements after that, after the slap episode, right? Like you get up there and it's like, so are we excited about some sound editing? So I wanted to talk about national conservatism as not an ideology, because that gets covered a lot, but as an organized international movement that's beginning to be institutionalized develop its own circuit for speakers, its own institutions for incubating cadres and for propagating its particular ideological position.
And should we be learning something from what they're doing?
Precisely. Should we be learning from what they're doing? And also, should we be focusing less on the ideological posturing of our adversaries? For instance, you have people like Richard Spencer who are out white nationalists, and they believe outrageous things openly, and they broadcast that, which attracts a great deal of attention, but also triggers a threat response. While really what you should be looking for may not be the ideological content so much as the institutional apparatus that determines whether or not that ideological content is at all relevant. Richard Spencer and that whole stream of overtly racist alt-right politics, it had its moment around the Trump election, but it has been ostracized from the establishment Republican Party, and it has failed to develop any institutions of its own. Meanwhile, the National Conservative Movement, which, to explain it briefly, it's European style ethno-nationalism with a strong emphasis on tradition and conformity, hierarchy, with just enough of a welfarist statist orientation so that you end up with a relatively strong state that can curb individual behavior and some redistribution to permit the people who are considered to be living correctly, the correct type of people, to have families, reproduce, and stay with a sense of dignity and place. And there's different variations of it. Some are more religious, some are more ethno-national. And this particular tendency, which has always been common in Europe, but in the United States was really pushed aside because of its attraction to overt white supremacists and its tendency to constantly center questions of racial, religious, and ethnic identity in a way that pro-business conservatives really would prefer to keep out of the picture. That variant, and you can think of people like Pat Buchanan as both an excellent example of that ideology in terms of what he says, and also its marginalization. As long as he was useful, he had a place in the Republican Party, but when he tried to steer it in his ideological direction, the best he could do was as a protest candidate who won, I think, one primary against George H.W. Bush. After that, he was exiled from the Republican Party for years. So the fact that you have networks of national conservatives, both in the United States and in Europe, that are beginning to hold conventions, that have journals, that have foundations, and that are beginning to eat into the more conventional libertarian style conservative institutions, represents a potential scene change in the Republican Party and in the right wing of US politics, which is not to say that you'll see a step away from capital or anything that looks like pro-worker or socialist welfarist policies, but you will also not have slavish water carrying for peak industry be their only reason for existing. And the one thing that I I found particularly remarkable about this development. And the reason that I talk about it is last week they had their European convention, National Conservatism in Europe, in Brussels. In November, they had the American one, which looks like it might be becoming a kind of NatCon APAC or similar political convention and decision point, an ideological decision point for the party. And it's that this is the same strategy that the libertarian and neoliberal wings of the Republican Party used to disrupt the post-war Keynesian liberal consensus. Friedrich Hayek and other neoliberal sort of free market fundamentalist economists, together with Ayn Rand and some very sympathetic billionaires, created the Mont Pelerin Society as a way to institutionalize that ideology and to begin to propagate it. First, going from conservative ideological outlet to conservative ideological outlet, but eventually colonizing all of those and pushing itself into universities, the media, etc., until beginning in the 1980s, you have ideological hegemony from that side. Right now, the NatCons may be in an even better position than libertarian or neoliberal conservatives or neoliberal economic types in general, because they already have their Margaret Thatcher and Viktor Orban. They already have their model test case, which has been around long enough to look very attractive. And they also have an excellent rival to push against in this identitarian CRT and trans rights exclusive wing of the left, the so-called left. So we'll see how it develops, but in this model, we also see what it takes to win in Western-style electoralism. You need to not only have a coherent ideological position, but you need to have institutions that can sustain that position through the many years that it takes to propagate it through what Gramsci called the long march through the institutions, to be able to fundamentally shift the political spectrum so that even when you lose, your opponents, like Bill Clinton, end up doing exactly what you would have done. So that's what I wanted to talk about. I regret that I don't have like a clip of Tucker Carlson slapping Sean Hannity for offending Alan Colmes's honor. But this is something that we should be concerned about, because it augurs the future.
It's a very novel and very, very creative analytical framing, Kuba. I applaud you for coming up with it. I just question, right, in terms of the dialectic that we're in between the liberal. I know people hate the term globalist, but I don't really know many other words to really explain them. The neoliberal globalists and the reactionary right, who you're calling the NatComs. The left seems pretty irrelevant to me in this whole discourse, in this dialectic. And a dialectic is pretty much just a fancy word to say a 2-point kind of conjunction between two ideological factions where you try to get a synthesis in terms of how they work out between the two. So my whole thing is like, what you're saying is that the right faction really is split in two. Is that split? Now, I know we shouldn't attribute that split to Trumpism, because it predates Trumpism, particularly in
Buchanan
Europe.
didn't require Trump.
Right. It predates paleoconservatism. if you will. Maybe we could go back to what's my man in '64?
Goldwater.
We can go back to Goldwater. All right. Some would argue Reagan was a paleoconservative. He's very Thatcher, right? He's he's Thatcher before Thatcher.
Well, that's the thing. Thatcher is not a paleoconservative. She is from the libertarian angle, where all of the you keep an affinity towards the outcomes with paleoconservatives, the hierarchies and the structures, but it's all laundered through this economic lens and this economic framework, which secures the participation of peak capitalist interests.
Right, but paleoconservatives believe in economic protectionism.
They believe in economic protectionism. They are also much more dirigiste about telling companies, do this, don't do this, you can sell this, you can't sell this, and setting a minimum wage or other types of pro-worker interventions. The first welfare states in Europe, for instance, were introduced not by social democrats, but by Otto von Bismarck, who took that fusion of public services provisioned at a universal or near universal level with conservative traditionalist social policies and came up with the template for Christian democracy.
That's a really fascinating point. I really appreciate that addition as well. But the question I'm asking, right, is that so fine. The precedents go back to Pat Buchanan, maybe Reagan, or so on and so forth. But we have the current faction of the Trumpists and the traditional Trumpists being the NatComs, and maybe you would call them neoconservative Republicans, if you will, or just whatever.
I see the political game played out on two levels. One is the kind of celebrity culture, personal campaign, which individual is going to lead the party. And the interests of most people who seek elected office are just winning. There's no necessary ideological backbone. Bill Clinton's a great example. Arguably, Barack Obama is a good example. They are charismatic. They're good at winning people over, and they're willing to do as they're directed, or as they're incentivized.
Mm-hmm.
And the role of these institutions is to incentivize cynical elected officials to stay on the ideological course. That their means of it's classic sort of nerd politics. The elected leaders are much too, and this is a very U.S.-centric take, so I'm not universalizing, but in the American case, most elected leaders have to spend all of their time raising money or campaigning. So nerds, meaning think tanks, places like Mont Pelerin, places like AEI, places like Brookings, if you're a centrist, they do the nerd work of making sure your homework gets done. They provide you with the policy positions. They give you the recommendations. They give you the talking points. And as long as your policies tack in their direction, it's fine. It's all gravy. If you start playing footsie with policies or personalities, positions that are beyond the pale, then those institutions can also withhold the homework. They can also start making trouble for you. And that, especially at the conventions, which serve as kind of gatekeeping moments ahead of primary season. So the fact that you have the Trumpists around, they're just another tribe of utterly cynical, completely superficial political entrepreneurs. But now they have some institutionalized basis, people to do their homework for them, people who will support them, people who will apply pressure to other Republicans to fall into that line. Before, all of that weight was on the side of the conventional, the establishment, the globalist Republicans, if you will, the pure neoliberal, pure capitalist strain. And now that, and the reason for that was because the two strains used to cohabit the same institutions, but the national conservatives, the paleo conservatives, people like Pat Buchanan were purged.
Right.
So instead of trying to go back into these institutions that they lost, they're creating their own parallel structure that's going to exclude people like the Lincoln Project types, while pushing in to Heritage Foundation, AEI, Cato, other places.
Manhattan Institute.
The Manhattan Institute, precisely. That right now are in the hands of the libertarian, neoliberal, economy first wing of the Republican Party.
Do you think the situation in Ukraine is creating the foreground that is facilitating this even more efficaciously?
No, I think it's actually wrong-footed, the NatCons, because one of the litmus tests for which side of that internal civil dispute, right, that right-wing factionalism, was your attitude towards Ukraine, your attitude towards Russia. If you were soft on Putin, like as Jeff Foxworthy would say, if you got a lot of nice things to say about Vladimir Putin, you might just be a NatCon. Anyway, I got more accent training to do, judging by Pascal's expression. But in any case, the war has reinvigorated, has given like moral legitimacy and a sense of purpose and an opportunity to grandstand to the globalists of both parties. It has reinvigorated NATO. It has reinvigorated the EU. And as a result, NatCons are kind of scrambling to ensure that they don't fall apart and capitulate when sort of their patriotism is impugned. And I think that this moment will pass, and that the NatCons have a structural advantage over the business as usual neoliberals, which is partly what you're seeing with the exodus of people like the Lincoln Project types from the Republican Party, the foreign policy neoconservatives in general, and attempting to colonize, just as Heritage and Cato are being colonized by NatCons, pushing out neoliberals and neocons. Those two groups are busy colonizing Brookings and the DNC.
Well, the question is, who are the deep pockets in the Republican faction? Who are the Koch brothers backing?
The Koch brothers were instrumental in backing the Mont Pelerin Society and the neoliberals in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. But one of them is dead. And other billionaires, people like Peter Thiel, for instance, and people like the Mercer family, they are on Team NatCon. They're bankrolling a lot of these institutions, events, creating sinecures, essentially, to incubate their intellectual cadres from, the job market, which might impose a capitalist discipline that prevented them from being sufficiently racist.
Well, we're going over time.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. This will be a bonus free show.
Well, the question I was going to ask you is that since we realize the NatCons they have no ideological project when it comes to capitalism besides keeping up with neoliberalism. Like Trump was not trying to reform capitalism at all. He was just basically capitalism with more protectionist politics around manufacturing in America, which we all know is never going to happen. And that's it, right? And because we know that capitalism is going to have to collapse, and some people are saying that it's impending right now. We have the whole yield curve. We have two consecutive yield curves, blah blah blah. Interest rates coming up. There's all of this discourse. Like, aren't we really just tap dancing on two edges of a mountain that's where either side we're going to fall off anyway?
Oh, I mean, it's true that neither option is good, but they're bad in different ways, and those differences are important. They're important in terms of what you can expect, what types of pressure. They're important in how you can adjust, and they're important about what you need to look for to know when it's time to run away.
So how is this going to? Here's the question I have, right? Okay, and this is kind of relate. Really. I'm gonna take a I'm gonna take a walk on the wild side here. I kind of believe that Biden and NATO and EU's strategy of crushing the Russians and stopping the multipolar development with China and Russia is going to fail. I kind of have a feeling. I'm not saying the Russians are going to win and take over Ukraine. I kind of have a feeling that there are too many important foreign countries, India, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, that are literally letting you know that they don't have either a problem with multipolarity or they are willing to actually support multipolarity for NATO and the US and the EU to stop this from happening. And one of the reasons why I'm convinced this is not working out is that I don't see Israel taking risks at that level. I don't see Israel siding with a loser here. Yes, they seem a little bit more objective, but I don't see them taking that risk.
I would disagree with you about Israel, because I think that Israel is actually so well insulated that they can do whatever they want. Like, think about the full-throated support that Netanyahu gave to Trump, and before that, his open defiance of Barack Obama's Mideast policy.
That's fair. That's a fair consideration.
However, Saudi, UAE, they are highly dependent on American security guarantees. So if they're hedging, then that really is a canary in the coal mine, and in all likelihood, looking down 20, 30 years, they recognize that multipolarity is inevitable, and you're better off making your peace with it and beginning to accommodate that reality than, especially since the upside of trying to shut it down along with Team America, Team West, is just having a cushier relationship with the West that you already have. Especially given that one of the consequences of the very policies that Western countries are pursuing in terms of Russian energy is a greater dependence on the oil exporters they're trying to pressure.
So, do you see multipolarity as an inevitability?
Yes.
Okay. That being said, how does this work with the paradigm you set up right now between the NatComs and the traditional conservatives?
Well,
Do you see
just
the neoliberal globalists being just shut out?
well, you don't need if you're going to make a lavish feast, you don't need all of the buffalo to do it. Just because American hegemony isn't global, and the Western network of networks of economic ties, investment, institutional ties, isn't fully global, but limited to the Eurozone, North America, much of Latin America, and it's very competitive in East Asia, parts of the rest of the world. That is a huge value to maintain that system, even if you can't project it universally. So the neoliberal side always has a home. There's always a case to be made for them because there are always powerful interests willing to fund the preservation of those networks. And they might lose in terms of foreign policy. They might not achieve their ambitions of going fully global, but that doesn't mean that they won't have a role. And the NatCons will push against that. They will want less investment in those networks and more of an inward-looking policy focus. And both of them will be bad. The risks that come from neoliberalism are very well established. Like, they'll privatize everything. They'll make people die for lack of insulin. They'll monetize the 30 seconds of attention that you have, like when you're washing your hands in the restroom. It'll be invasive and it'll be insidious. The NatCons are more likely to shut down Pornhub, and along with it, block all kinds of other cultural expression on the basis of outrages to public morality. They're more likely to go after immigrants. Those are tendencies that are much stronger in the NatCon wing than in the neoliberal wing.
And yeah, these are the really kind of ethno-fascist type sympathy that these organizations that they have. And also, the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and I proposed this before, and people were like, no, it'll never happen. What's to stop the NatComs from going to social democracy?
Oh, I mean, like I said earlier, the first the first welfare states in Europe were conservative ones, brought into place by the Prussians and the Germans, largely as a national security measure. With universal conscription, you started seeing the condition of young men that were coming in that you needed to do battle against the French, the Turk, the Russian, and they were malnourished and illiterate. You couldn't use them to win a war. Therefore, universal education, therefore, universal health care. And the same is true of Japan. It was only after the Meiji Restoration and the introduction of universal military service that Japanese policymakers, the Japanese state, started paying attention to public health, public education, realized that this was a problem, and sought to rectify it. And they didn't care, just like Otto von Bismarck didn't care, that it would mean that profits would be down for some industrialists, because they had this state and nation interest that they put ahead of the capitalist class interest. So a reversion to that kind of struggle between economically oriented liberal elites and sort of national traditional state oriented counter reactionary counter elites, that can push out everybody else from the political scene. And indeed, one effort that I'd say is incipient, but definitely underway, is the attempt by some, ideologically laundered Republicans to push or pull or yank or shame the Democratic Party into being the catch-all liberal alternative, while purging any leftist elements along with other undesirables.
Wow. Well, I think we're ready to wrap it up.
I think we are ready. Look at Pascal, is just the main host all of a sudden.
Man, it's been a long week for me, brother.
That's really, don't want to hear you complain about your week. Well, recently actors Mila Kunis, a Ukrainian national, and her husband Ashton Kutcher have raised over $34 million for Ukrainian refugees. Much of the funds will go to relief supplies to neighboring countries around Ukraine, and $10 million is tapped for the online vacation rental company Airbnb, in which Kutcher was an early investor. The United States has passed emergency legislation to allow up to 100,000 Ukrainian nationals into the U.S. with temporary refugee status. Pascal and Kuba, have you guys seen this?
No.
You mentioned it to me before.
Once admitted as refugees, these people will have immediate access to dozens of emergency resources provided by hundreds of established government agencies and nonprofit organizations, in addition to Kunis and Kutcher's millions in housing assistance. Meanwhile, in their home state of California, more than 160,000 lack adequate housing and have no access to any of these resources, including the funds that these benevolent philanthropists have raised. Companies like Airbnb are quite complicit in the gentrifying of cities and rising rents, creating what I like to call domestic refugees. Airbnb currently hosts over 7 million listings and is active in more than 100,000 cities across 220 countries and regions. And they openly aim to reach 1 billion guests annually by 2028. A U.S. study found that for every 1% increase in Airbnb listings, there was a 0.3% increase in housing prices and rent. So while these philanthrocapitalists are raising millions of dollars to launder their reputation as one of the biggest corporate gentrifiers in the world, more domestic refugees are facing harsher conditions in the COVID era. In California, my home state, families at the top of the income distribution scale earn 12.3 times more than families at the bottom. In practical numbers, this means that families in the 90th percentile, which are the minority, earn upwards of $260,000 annually, while families in the 10th percentile, which are the increasing majority, earn around $21,000 annually. This is creating a growing and potentially insurmountable chasm between the haves and the have-nots. In early 2022, the median rent in California for a one-bedroom apartment was just over $1,500, which means that the families living at the top of the income distribution scale can afford to rent 14 apartments, whereas families at the bottom of the scale can't even afford to rent one. Recently in LA, a nonprofit organization called Fathers and Mothers Who Care had planned to put on 3 events at a South Central office to help people obtain emergency shelter. Did you guys see this at all in the news? Have you heard about this?
No.
Okay. An unofficial Instagram post informed the mostly unhoused community that they were giving out Section 8 vouchers at this event. So a nonprofit organization says, we're going to help you guys find emergency shelter. And an Instagram post says, oh, they're just handing out Section 8 vouchers.
Wow.
It didn't help that Congresswoman Maxine Waters showed up to the event as well. Per the LA Times, quote, the crowd overwhelmed Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority workers who were unable to meet more than a small fraction of the need and left while throngs of people were still waiting for help. The Housing Authority was there at the behest of Waters, who delivered emotionally charged remarks to the crowd Friday, at one point using an expletive to defend her efforts to relieve the city's housing and homeless crisis, unquote. As the people overwhelmed the staff on site to help with temporary housing, their frustration turned to agitation quickly. Unable to do what people thought they had come down for, get vouchers for permanent housing, Rep. Maxine Waters told the people to, quote, go home.
Ouch.
Is that ironic, moronic, tone deaf, or evil? I don't know. I do know what it's like to look for housing in a market where shelter, a human need, is not only scarce, but brutally commodified. And I know what it's like to work with a defeated, unhoused population that is worn out from the bureaucratic red tape to get through just to be qualified as eligible as homeless. What stage of capitalism have we reached when Instagram scams are designed to mine the data of the indigent? Quite literally, the most vulnerable members of any community. People fighting just to survive from day to day now are the victims to clickbait quick money scams. We're in a state of financial and moral collapse, and companies like Airbnb, much like Uber and Lyft, are fighting harder and smarter to avoid any sort of state interference in their mission for maximum growth. Part of this growing problem is that chasm of inequality, because the greater that divide grows, the easier it is for the haves to ignore the have-nots. Ambassador Matthew Rycroft of the UK mission to the UN once said, "How a society treats its most vulnerable is always the measure of its humanity." In a country where the privileged minority could quite easily provide badly needed assistance to the underprivileged majority without taxing its own vast resources, but chooses instead to turn a blind eye to the suffering masses, humanity itself may be lost in the shuffle. And on that note, thank you guys so much. It's been a busy week. Saturday show coming up is going to be our cross stream with the homies at Left Reckoning. Stay tuned. Also, check out Pascal on Big Waz's show. Pascal was also on David Feldman's show this past Monday. We also did the Beyond the Red Zone show this past Monday. If you're a patron, movie night was fabulous. Thank you guys so much. And on that note, we are out.